Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
And we are recording. Jason Miller, welcome back to Weird Web Radio. It is really awesome to have you here again.
Thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be here again.
Good deal. And for those of you who somehow may not know who Jason is on the show by now, Jason is the author of several incredible books at this point, including The Sorcerer's Secrets, Protection Reversal Magick, Elements of Spellcasting, Sex, Sorcery, and Spirits. Who doesn't dig a title like that? Awesome courses, Sorcery of Hekate. I recommend it. The Strategic Sorcery course was a life-changing, game-changing thing for me years ago at this point. And several arcane audio kind of lessons that he is literally the sorcerer who does the things and teaches all the awesome stuff. And I am a connoisseur of his fine products. So well, it's really cool to have you again. In fact, this appearance, Jason, I think makes you in the lead. You are the most returned guest at this point.
Well, hot damn.
Yeah.
I feel like, one of those 5-timers on SNL. Like there should be like a Weird Web jacket or something.
Oh, shit. Now I got to get you a sticker. Scratch and sniff.
There you go.
Smells like dead things. So Jason has a new book coming out titled Consorting With Spirits. Totally dig the title. This is a nice follow-up to the episode that's going to be out right before you, Mortalis, and their new book about necromancy. What a great follow-up episode.
Nice.
Right? Lines right up.
Absolutely.
One thing I wanted to talk about is you say Consorting with Spirits is the name of a crime that was once committed not all that long ago, something you could actually be charged with in recent history. Considering that this magic could have made you and I criminals, do you have a favorite story from a time when people were charged as criminals for consorting with spirits?
Oh my, what a good question. And one I don't have a ready answer to, but there are, I mean, I guess Isabel Gowdy is, I don't know if it was consorting with spirits officially that she was charged with, but I mean, she is sort of the, if you look at the confessions that she gave, I mean, you can build a practice out of that. That's like this is not just some little old lady who the neighbors wanted to get rid of. She clearly had a lot to say on the matter. But then there, I should really get this up. But there's a family. There's in Ireland. A mother and 2 daughters that were tried for consorting with spirits, and I think it was in relation to regicide, like an attempt to kill the king over something.
Okay.
But I remember like the descriptions, again, extracted under torture, of familiar spirits that would spend the night in bed with them and suckle on them like babes and then go off and do magic. That's like very cool and could totally see a local familiar or a familiar spirit doing that with someone. So yeah.
Suckling spirits. Everyone should have one or two, right?
Well, yeah, or could be bad, I guess, if like parasitic or something. Yeah. But depends on your view.
Yeah,
so many of these things depend on your view.
That could be your next book: Suckling Spirits and 20 other fun things you can do with a Ouija board.
Oh yes, like just the book of bad ideas. Like,
Right?
you know, I once actually I was going to do something like that. I said, you know, everyone is like paranoid about Ouija boards, and like that, you know, if you play with one, you're just welcoming possession. And I'm like, and occultists are really paranoid about Enochian, like, you know, that it can drive you insane. It's so powerful you can't even speak Ola Sunuveo or Saji, like, for fun, because the language is so powerful. So I was just like, I want to produce an Enochian Ouija board, like, you know, possession guaranteed.
An Enochian Ouija board. Fuck yes. I mean, Kickstarter can make this happen.
You know, it's so weird now, having come up when I came up, and now, you know, just anything you dream of, somebody with a laser cutter is just going to be like, yeah, I can whip those out. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, we're gonna have to check Etsy at least like 3 weeks after this episode comes out and see if there's any Enochian Ouija boards.
I want 10% of the, you know, of the profits, not the net, but, you know,
right,
not the growth, the net, but yeah.
fair enough.
Boards.
Yeah, Ouija boards are a weird thing. I think they're fascinating. They're one of my favorite forms of occult art. Thank goodness I don't have the money or the room to just fill some space with all the different kinds that you encounter and find. Mitch Horowitz, occult historian, occultist himself, has written quite a bit about Ouija boards and the history of them, and, you know, a lot of the misconceptions. And I would recommend folks go out there and find those if you find yourself concerned about the phrase Ouija board.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In your book, your new book, you say, you talk about the difference between consorting and conjuring.
Yeah.
And why relationships matter. That's kind of a 3-part question, but those 3 concepts, I think, are worth unpacking for people thinking about getting into working with spirits.
So, you know, conjuring a spirit is calling a spirit to you, getting its attention. Could be through an evocation, but not necessarily. You know, it could be something more informal than that. But you go into it thinking, there's a spirit that I want to contact. I'm going to call it up. I'm going to conjure it. Could be a seance. Could be going to a grave and lighting a candle. Could be going, you know, it doesn't have to be an act of ceremonial magic. But you conjure it. You either ask it for information or for a boon, or you do whatever you do, and then it's over, right? Consorting implies an ongoing relationship. When you consort, someone who consorts with spirits is someone who lives a life where spirits are an important role. Some come and go, just like people, where you conjure them and then they leave. But some you develop long-term relationships with that build and change over time, just like with people. And it's how to deal with that, the benefits of that, and the responsibilities and parameters and boundaries of that are something that I don't often see talked about in magic. And so one of the special things I wanted to address in this book is, I mean, of course, there's, you know, there's spirit examples and different types of evocation that you can try out. But I really wanted to get a guide for, like, you know, this is how you manage spirits in your life. Because that's where I see people going wrong, is in the what they do with what a spirit tells them, or how they maintain a relationship, or the or the boundaries they set, how they evaluate things. This is really sort of what I most wanted to address in the book. And so Consorting with Spirits was the ideal, other than a nod to the crime. It was this idea of like, hey, this is about more than just, I did a spell, a spirit came, I asked for something, and then it went, and I got it or I didn't get it, and thus it worked or it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, this is about life. This is about being a witch or a sorcerer, not following a ceremony once.
Yeah, I think in more Western style occultism, we don't see a lot of that build a relationship with the spirit kind of lessons or approaches. However, in heathenry, as an example, having right relationship with the spirits around you is something that is important, and survives in the lore. One of my favorite stories comes from one of the Icelandic sagas. And it's just a guy who's basically throwing shit into the river near his farm saying, this is for you. Now leave me the hell alone. You know?
You know what? That idea of offering to get something to leave you the hell alone is that's another thing that people sort of misunderstand.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, in my Sorcery of Hekate course, there's, I tell people, you can acknowledge your ancestors, see them gathered outside the mandala gates and so on. And then people, of course, are like, well, I don't like my ancestors. They're, I'm gay and they were against gay people, or I don't think they would have accepted me as gay because, unless they happen to have been gay, if they lived before mid 20th century, there's every chance in the world that's the reality. Or, my ancestors accepted slavery as real, and that's heinous and awful. And it is, but it was also completely normal as part of life. And it never should have been, and it was always heinous and awful. But my argument isn't that you should get to know your ancestors to forgive them or anything. No. You can give them an offering to get to know them better, but you can also give them an offering to be like, okay, now shut the fuck up and go away. Like, I'm not really interested in anything you have to say. Mm-hmm. Like, and if people have really serious issues with their family, that might be the best tactic. Yeah. Look, I can't change the fact that my physical body is made from DNA inherited from you fuckers, but here's an offering to acknowledge that. Now shut the fuck up. Like, here's something and just leave me alone.
Yeah.
And how much of old magic is like that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, here's an offering to the gods. This Zikiakampa, Zianakampa. Remember what? Remember, I'm giving you this offering and you promise not to fuck with me. That's it. It's not like, oh, I want to get close to the gods and worship them and they know what's best for me. It's really like, no, these things are dangerous and we might want to just give them an offering so that, we can say, leave me alone. Or, a lot of what Buddhists do is they recognize the fact that the way that we live as human beings has an impact on the environment. And there are spirits of nature and of the environment that are inconvenienced, to put it mildly. Mm-hmm. And so you're making these offerings of reparation to say, I know, we burn trash and we drive these cars and everything else. And, maybe my house is now in an area that used to be a sacred grove and I'd never even know it. But, I'm sorry, here's an offering. It's best I can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I like how you've always taught that too in your general offering, right? To different classes of beings. You've always included, to make offerings to those that you may have offended just simply by existing the way we exist in the Western world. Yeah. You are offending some spirits.
That's it.
Yeah.
Nobody's hands are clean.
All right.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't seek to make them as clean as possible. So some people are just like, well, nobody's hands are clean, so screw it. But no, I mean, we should definitely always do the best we can. but for sure, nobody's hands are clean.
That's true. That's something that I often think about, even just like the devices we're using to have this conversation. If you go back and think about how they're made,
Oh man.
oh my God, where they get the components just to make these things possible.
I,
I look at people sometimes and I'm like, we are Rome. We just don't know
you
where our shit comes from.
you hit on it right there. We could, in the way that if I went around the country and asked everyone, like, hey, if slavery was legal, would you own slaves? No one other than like complete sociopaths would raise their hand.
Right.
And yet it was at one point normal. I really believe that, 100 years from now, if people were like, hey, if the cost of having like a phone in your pocket was 9-year-olds dying in cobalt mines, would that be okay? People would be like, no, my God, that's awful. But and I pick up my phone every day and I think about a story I read about a 9-year-old boy in a cobalt mine in the DRC, and I think about it, and then I play Wordle. So that's awful, and it is awful. But yeah, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least acknowledge that it's awful, and then if we get the ability to do anything at all about it, to do something about it. So.
Oh no, I agree. ADF even has a part of their core order ritual where they include making offerings to what's called the outsiders. Basically saying, here's an offering to all of you who would do harm or interrupt or cause mischief or mayhem in the practice of this particular rite. Please stay the fuck away.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not a guarantee that they will either.
No,
right?
Not at all.
It's not a guarantee that they will, but some will.
Yeah.
And so then what you're doing is you're minimizing the harm from further protection measures that you might have to take.
Yeah.
Right? Like after this, I'm going to put up walls. And if there's something that I determine is actually causing issue, then I'm going to exercise and like actively combat and bind. So what you're doing is you're saying, hey, some shit's about to go down. Take this and get out.
Yeah.
Like I can buy you a drink or I can beat your ass. One of those two things is gonna happen.
Right. Oh man, a great example of this kind of thing that's played out in my own life was at Trothmoot a few years ago. We were in Maryland that year, and for years, for some reason, the Troth, with which I've held leadership positions of, I still do. They had what was called the Loki ban. That at an official Troth event, Troth bloats, Troth rituals, and so on, you could not raise a horn, hold a ritual, or anything to praise or hail Loki. He was blackballed, and after I got on the high read, the board of directors of the Troth, there was growing discussion among read members about how we wanted to remove the Loki ban, and actual concern about how this might affect membership and so on. That year at Trothmoot, we're doing what's called the Grand Sumble. It's the big ritual that the Troth holds every year. It's quite fascinating visually and emotionally, and it's a really cool rite. Anyway, as the horns are making their rounds, and each round goes by, and people are hailing the gods and ancestors and sharing stories and poems and songs and real personal stuff. It's gone to the official end of the ritual. But people like to hang around, do more rounds,
right?
Tip that horn some more. Let's keep this thing going. We're in the groove here, right?
Absolutely.
And Rob Schreier, who's the steer of the Troth at the time, he's currently the steer again, president of the organization, just makes this mention because half the room literally gets up and leaves. And that we all know what they're doing. They're going to another area of the campground to have an unofficial Loki bloat.
Yeah.
To honor Loki. Every one of them are Lokians, or Loki is a part of their life, and they wanted to do this thing. and they're off doing their ritual. They're in the midst of their ritual, and Rob addresses the gathering. It's in the other room and says, you know, we're the people who are actively really involved with this organization. You're here. He's like, who among us here actually has a problem with Loki?
Right.
And not one arm goes up. And he says, I think it's time that we face the reality of what we're doing to a significant number of our membership, and we end this madness and this discrimination of banning and making uncomfortable this portion of our membership, and allow Loki to be part of our actual rituals. Those words dropped from his mouth, and the lights in that room and the entire campground from that moment until I left the next day were strobe lights.
Wow.
The whole fucking campground
Nice.
were strobe lights. And all I could think was, I think Loki digs it. But he's going to fuck with you for that as a little payback. And to wrap it up, but in payback to Loki and the Lokians, we made it there's a central Loki focused ritual every year for the amount of years that it was banned at all Troth events. So anyway, that's a interesting experience I went through once with a particular god-sized spirit that people didn't want around, and he decided he was going to be.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right
So
on.
have you encountered any such kind of, there's no doubt that this thing, despite being told to stay away, is going to be part of your life?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, it's, as I keep saying in the book, it's like it is with people, right? Like, there are certain people that you meet and you decide you don't want them around, and then you take steps to avoid them, and they're gone, basically. But then there are people that you have their family, or they're just somehow important, and you can eventually ban them or get rid of them. But the presence of that is always an issue, right? Like, when people think about, goodness, when people think about family that they don't want to see anymore, I don't think that there are many people who make that decision and never think about it again at holidays. Who that weight doesn't fall, and that other family member would be like, you should maybe reconnect, and be like, no. So in that sense, they're always there. But I am a strong believer in boundaries with spirits and with people. And so if the Troth had decided and continued to decide that they didn't want Loki around, then there were steps they could have taken to continue the ban. In the Tibetan community, there's a big issue surrounding Dorje Shugden. It boils down to even what is the nature of this spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's a big issue. People have died. People have been murdered over the issue.
Oh, wow.
And people on both sides face bias and recrimination over the issue. So it's not a simple issue. And sometimes Westerners will hear it and they'll suddenly like double down on the side that they think they're on, but all they're really hearing is one side. They're not hearing two sides. And so it's sort of like, this is an issue. This issue doesn't even really concern you. So like, you don't need to have very strong feelings on it one way or the other. But there are there are issues where, if somebody has that, an initiation with that spirit, and then they are in a place where that spirit is banned, then there can be angst, and that happens and gets divined to be the work of a spirit, either that spirit or a spirit in its retinue, which is always another aspect of this. Like, everyone forgets that demons have legions of spirits. They're not just operating alone. So when people are like, oh, well, this demon, this god, this whatever spoke directly to me, I'm always like, probably a mall Santa. Like, we all, like, kids figure out pretty early that the guy at the mall isn't Santa, but they still believe in Santa because, of course, Santa is real. Kids.
Right. Spoilers.
And so they go to the mall and they're like, hey, listen, I know the deal. I know you're not Santa, but when you report back to him, this is what I want. So, it's the mall Santa effect. The local spirit is manifesting and taking the place of that spirit, or being its appointed representative. There's all kinds of layers like this can happen. But yeah, I've had plenty of issues where spirits that made themselves known and wanted to be present, and then were kind of wild in ways that I didn't care for, and disruptive in ways that I didn't care for. But I then don't go and say, well, that's just so-and-so, ha, ha, ha. I then, there are literally, I have an area, I was just talking about this to my black school course. There is a giant wooden cabinet that is in my garage. It's not even attached to the house right now. And it's sacred storage. Right? There are things in there that I put in there, and maybe I have the intent of taking them out again in the future. Some things in there that I'm just like, nope. Like, I don't have anything to do with you, and I don't want to give you away to somebody, but at the same time, I don't want you hanging around the house. I don't want you present here. And, yeah, so there are a couple spirits where I've said, nope. Too much hassle, too much, spirit connected with bats, that after the statue showed up, so did a bat. Like, and then, when I moved and set him up again, yet another bat. And I was like, you know what? Not worth it. Not dealing with this. Whatever the benefits are of working with you, and I don't care if the greatest magician in the world said this spirit is attached to you and you would get immense benefit from working with it. I'm just like, nope. Yeah, nope. I live by the rule of, like, if this was a person, how would I act? Mm-hmm. And I don't put up with petty, petulant, trouble-causing people in my life very often. So I'm damn sure not rolling with a spirit. And it's so funny because I come across people all the time in my courses and in the open sort of occult sphere. And there are some people who, okay, they have, maybe they have issues, but then there are other people, it's not even that they're having issues, but they are deathly afraid. They are deathly afraid of a spirit that they've been told that they should work with, or a god that they've been told they should work with, but they are deathly afraid of offending Hekate or something. Or like, if I said I would do this and I missed a day, and now I just feel like I've offended her and my life is going to be ruined from now on. Now, I love Hekate. You know this.
I'm there with you.
I'm a devotee. She has really She is the primary spirit behind the strategic sorcery course, and then of course the Sorcery of Hekate. So, but if I thought Hekate was this really like petulant, narcissistic, easily offended, vengeful being, I would never work with her.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. Just be like, no, fuck that. It's not worth it. Don't, and this is the case where people are like living in fear of spirits that they're working with, and they don't even have like, I mean, it's one thing if it's like the religion of your birth and your culture is like, do this. If you're one of us, you should do this. You're not really, oh, you're going to go to hell if you don't do this.
Right.
Like, that's pressure. Nobody is pressuring you to work with Hekate or Odin or Loki or any other spirit. Like,
Right.
if your nature is like, wow, Loki really speaks to me, and then you start working with Loki, and lo and behold, life is better. Whether that's more interesting, which Loki can certainly do,
Yeah.
or more productive, which Loki might be able to do, gives you tools of cleverness or influence, which Loki might be able to do. But if you get into it and you're like, but then again, people say Loki is evil, so I'm really like, I want to worship Loki, but I'm scared, and if I mess up, Loki's going to kill me.
Yeah.
Why are you even doing this? Like, what is the point? Why? What benefit do you think you're going to get?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you looking around at people who have like, that are just billionaires going like, yeah, well, this spirit is just, like, I have to be very, very careful, but, guide me billions of dollars, then okay, sure, maybe. Or, oh, well, I'm immortal. I can walk in front of a car and just, I get superpowers like a comic book. Okay, sure. I'm willing to put up with a little nonsense for that. Like, if I can be Moon Knight, I'll suffer the multiple personality disorder. Like, in exchange for the cool suit and powers. But, like, that's not how magic works. So people are, like, fearing and expecting even horror movie levels of inconvenience in exchange for what?
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably influenced, at least here, especially in the United States. I can't speak for the world, but that attitude, particularly here, has got to come from the infusion of organized Christianity as a predominant religion with the concept of hell and sin. And I think in people who, whether you're raised in it or not, you get those ideas that there's only one right way to approach a spirit or a god. And then you combine that with horror movies who tell you that the Ouija board's going to come alive and eat your children. Like, you get those two elements blending together, and I just think there's some baggage culturally that sticks with people.
It's not just Christian. And horror movies are big. In the book, I talk about, like, look, magic doesn't work like it works in Harry Potter, right? Or Dungeons and Dragons. It also doesn't work like it works in horror movies. Like,
right.
The magic you're using to summon the spirit works to summon the spirit. It probably also works to manage and, if necessary, get rid of the spirit as well. Right. So, like, the assumption that it's good enough to get you in trouble, but not good enough to get you out is just kind of silly thinking. Mm. But, I can't lay it all at Christianity, because if you look at ancient Greece, look at all the female monsters that we must be wary of. There's a little misogyny in that. There's a little, these are echoes of demons, of the Christian view of, what is in the dark is bad, what is in the light is good. And when you boil it down, this gets to a really just basic experience of, I can see shit coming at me in the daytime and I can't at night. So at night is unknown. Unknown is scary. Therefore, the dark is bad and the day is good, and dark is bad and light is good. And then we start attributing this up is better than down, and you can, I mean, there are people who do work in the social justice sphere that trace not only obvious racism, but even colorism within an ethnicity back to this kind of thinking. Like, in India, dark caste, darker people, lower castes. And in certain other areas, like, well, I'm looking for, I mean, even in African-American society, the paper bag test. Like, you could go to this African-American church if you are lighter than a paper bag. Like, so this kind of thing is like, it's the kind of thing that a witch or a magician should be getting rid of instead of succumbing to. And it's not to say that there's nothing ever to it, right? It's not to say that beings you encounter in the dark can't be dangerous. And beings you encounter in the light can be dangerous. And being able to see things coming is better than not. But, individuality. I always say the biggest difference between angels and demons isn't good or evil. It's not hot or cold, which is a division used sometimes in Haiti. It's not wrathful and peaceful even, which is a division used in Tantra. What I like to say is the biggest delineator, and this also doesn't hold true across the board, is a focus on individuality versus collectivism, right? Like demons, think about rebellion. Think about the rebel angel, the individual spark of like, I don't think this is good. I'm going to do things differently. Versus a collectivist, these are the rules. This is what we're all doing. Get on board. Whenever you decide to just like screw everybody else, I'm going to go my own way, it's dangerous. There are risks involved, right? But then again, there's also a massive amount. If you don't fit the view of the collective good, there can be tremendous evil on that day side too. And that it's not unique to Christianity. It has existed. It is the example that we live with now. And it is certainly an example that is fine to bring up. But people kind of sometimes act like before the advent of Christianity, everybody loved magic. No, the Romans in Greek had plenty of laws restricting magic, and as they did elsewhere. So there were all kinds of ways that
I certainly wouldn't make that suggestion that before the advent of Christianity there were none of these problems. But it's our current like predominant cultural influence.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't raised Christian. I wasn't raised in a church. I was never baptized. And yet I have a general, even without even trying, I had a general understanding of it, exposure to the concepts, discriminations, acceptances, and so on. Like you can't not know something about it. It permeates so much of our culture. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm looking forward to as far as like how the book is going to hit people is in the book, of course, I give an example of I think two styles of conjuration, and I give a pagan example using Hekate, and I give a Christian example, and I give a Luciferian example. I'm not particularly a Satanist or a Luciferian, but there are people that are going to, like, this is going to seriously break their minds, because in their heads, it's like, well, no, Satanism and Lucifer is evil, and the other side is good. And then likewise, there are Luciferians and Satanists are like, but I'm against Christians. Christianity is evil and it's wholly evil, and I stand against it in all ways. But my attitude has always been, there's a lot of good there, and it's also good to rebel against it. And that doesn't, it's kind of like, I always give the example of a teenager. I have 12-year-olds now, right? So I raise them with certain rules because kids need rules and parameters for their world. And then they're going to get to a certain point where they need to push the boundaries of that. And that is good for them as well, right? Like at a certain stage of their development, it is good for them to rebel and even break some of those rules. And then when they're adults, they'll look back and they'll say, that was a wise rule. And I know this because I broke it. And I can see why they had me eat my vegetables all the time. But then there will probably be, it would be hubris to think that they won't look back and say, that rule isn't so hot. That rule wasn't really chosen with wisdom. It was chosen based upon what he knew. And so I reject that rule. And I'll be an older fart then even more than I am now and just be like, you kids. But that's the process. That's how it goes. And so it's not like both the thing and the rebelling against the thing are in and of themselves healthy. Mm-hmm. It's when you bunker down on one side or the other and say, this is my side and I'm sticking with it no matter what. That's where it goes awry.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. You're going to break people's minds, some people's minds, with the blending, the coexistence of Luciferian practices, Christian practices, and pagan through Hekate.
Yeah. I
also think a lot of people who are familiar with your work at this point just know you're going to do that. That's because for me, after all these years, when I reflect on things like what even is a sorcerer versus a witch versus a pagan and so on, this is one of those identifying things of sorcery for me, is the ability and willingness to traffic with all manner of spirits. That's something that seems to be an identifying thing to me that is sorcery. Yeah. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Put that in the next book.
But with discernment. With
discernment. Yeah. Of course. Yeah, with discernment. Discernment is important. Discernment is a good word to go into the next question, I guess. So, but we've talked on the show before about how you discern between like the voice of a spirit and the voice of your own imagination. And that comes back to having a solid meditation practice. We've gotten into that and into those weeds.
Yeah.
How do you discern? This is something we've never talked about before, but you do get into in your book. How do you discern the form of manifestation of a spirit that you're dealing with?
Right. So, it's always a matter of allowing it or giving multiple options and then meeting it wherever you're able to meet it, right? And so there are some spirits that you'll sit and I've had spirits appear in the room like you were standing in the room. And like where I can't see through them. And I look away and then I look back and they're still in the same place, like a physical object. They're not moving with my eyes because they're really in my mind. They're in that space. And then that's a rarity. And then there are times that the spirits appear. I can detect visually something going on. If there's a vessel for the spirit, like a statue or a seal, that might jump to life in a way. If there's a mirror or a crystal ball, I might see something that pulls me in there to detect it that way, to reach through that way. If that doesn't work, then I might close my eyes and start following my senses. By that I mean literally, like, okay, close my eyes. What do I hear? What do I feel? What do I sense? And how do I know this? So I'm literally taking the sounds that I'm physically hearing and I'm thinking, how do these get processed in my brain? And then follow that train back out. What else is there on that, embedded in that signal, right? What more subtle thing can I detect? And that's where maybe you start to hear the still small voice. Or maybe you start to get an inspiration that you wonder afterwards, was that the spirit or was that me fantasizing? Like, did I just layer upon that? And sometimes you might even, like, you get nothing and you reach out with a daydream. Like, well, if the spirit was there, what might I see? And you really start to reach out with your imagination. But then at some point, something grips hold of that daydream. And you start to think, did I actually dream that? Because, or was that imprinted? Or that's not what I visualized. It looks different now. These are all different, and there are a dozen other ways to reach out. But the reality is, no experience that you've ever had is 100% perception or your own projection. None. They're all a combination. And so we have to acknowledge that perception and projection, there's a ratio in any communication. Even the communication that you and I are having right now. If we're talking about subtle beings, we should expect the ratio to be a little more wonky. That maybe there's a little more that we're projecting onto it than is actual perception. But then we also have to get into, why does it matter? Right? Like, when we get out of this experience, maybe the spirit manifested like, Lonnie is in the room with me. Or maybe it was a dream afterwards. Nothing happened during the operation, and then that evening I had a dream. Or maybe it wasn't even that, but then the next morning my wife points out an article and it has the answer or a clue that I've been looking for as to what I should do. Was that the spirit, or was it synchronicity or kismet? If you walk away with something that is either meaningful or actionable, it doesn't really matter whether you attribute it to the spirit or not. It's a thing that happened. Mm-hmm. Move on. You're not looking as a sorcerer or a witch or a magician to create a scientific proof. And if you are, good luck. But it's not at all what I'm interested in. So,
right.
And so it comes down to, well, did it really matter? I have this thing that's either meaningful or actionable that has one level or another of projection and perception. And then looking back on my life, I can honestly say that there are some things where I've done an operation to contact a spirit or call upon a spirit and gotten exactly what I asked for in a miraculous amount of time. Like 24 hours later, suddenly this issue is resolved. You know, like money falls into my lap, or somebody withdraws whatever they were doing. Like a miraculous issue. But during the working, I got bupkis. Nothing. I called upon this spirit, and I could barely sense anything other than a sense of connection. a nebulous, no communication, right? But there are other times where a spirit has appeared as just real and solid as another being and then told me things that wound up being untrue or not useful.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, the ideal is we all wish that we could summon something, have it appear like it does on TV, tell us the secret things that we could take to the bank and just absolutely know for sure. But that's not how it works.
No.
Even when tradition says that's how it works, we have to it's time to look around and be honest and say, but it's not how it works.
Yeah.
So
there's a concept that you include in the book that gets into this that while I was reading it, I just kept nodding my head going, yes, yes, yes. And it's not something that I particularly can think of that I've really heard presented anywhere. And it's the idea of resonance. Yeah. The resonance with the spirit, the resonance with the place and so on. But that idea that just thinking about connection with a deity size spirit, for example, just having resonance with that. Could you break that down a little bit for people?
Yeah. And, in so many ways, for a magician or a witch, it is more important. And I want to stress this again. What we're about to describe, this resonance, is more important than getting them to appear and see them and get messages. All right?
Yes.
It's more important for a witch or a magician. And so the idea here is that continued exposure to a witch, to a power, be it a group of beings or a single being, especially in a very particular way, right? Continued work with that being, continued exposure to that being builds a resonance that makes you part of that being's divine machinery, right? Police officers in your town, they may or may not know the governor.
Yeah.
Right? They may or may not know the mayor of a large city, even though they work for him and they report to him. They are part of the machinery of the city, and they hold the authority thereof, and their actions get done with that weight. So if I'm in New York City and I break a law and I get handcuffed by some dude who's never met the mayor, guess what? I still am getting handcuffed and hauled off to jail.
Yeah.
So you get a resonance from the prayers and operations. So in a single use spell, think about folk magic, right? You're very often you're praying, you're saying psalms or something. You're not doing this with the intent of getting a visitation. You're doing this with the intent of building resonance to the powers that you're calling upon, who are now going to witness this symbolic act done with material things, which then connects this spiritual down to the material and then filters out into the world. So your candle, your folding of a petition, your taking of a bath, your separating of dolls, whatever it is, that's resonance, right? That's resonance. You don't actually need a spirit to come down and say, it will be done. Whoosh, gone. Mm-hmm. And this is true also of grimoire demons. If you look at Joseph Peterson had translated, I think it's a Venetian magical book. It's all spells done with seals that are essentially from the Grimoire Verum. But it's not necessary that you conjure that spirit right then and there. It's ideal if you have in the past conjured that spirit, but even if you haven't, if you have built up resonance with the powers that oversee it, you can operate this spell because of that resonance. And this is why I like for my courses that are like in depth, Sorcery of Hekate, Black School, the Jupiter course, where there's like a lot of Q&A, there's regular work that I encourage people or make people commit to in the case of Hekate. It's because it only works if there's this regular commitment and resonance. And occasionally, I won't lie, we can be months into a course and people will be like, I'm so bummed. I haven't seen Hekate yet. I haven't heard, like, no one has shown up in a way that I could see. No one has given me secret information. Whereas other people are popping on and like day one, they were like, oh my God, I said Io Heka Io Ho, which is a chant that we use in the Sorcery of Hekate. And they were like, I said it 3 times, and then Hekate appeared, she put a crown on my head, and then she took me on a magical journey through Narnia, and then like phantasmagoric shit. And I'm always like, people, settle down. Like you're at different extremes, but you both have work to do.
Right.
Like the one who's not getting anything, would it be nice if you got something? Sure, of course it would. And there are ways that you can work on that. But ultimately, it's the resonance that you've been building. And these people who say they don't see anything, they will actually be the first to say, but all my spells have been working out. And I'm growing as a person. And everything, like I feel life kind of getting a little easier around me, which is amazing. I just want this experience that so many people have of the goddess showing up and being like, hey, what's up, Lonnie? And I'm like, listen, I'm not interested in dial a deity. It's, and then I'm like, look at the other side. Look at the people for whom dial a deity is everything. Look at what they're reporting on. What of it is actionable? What of it is meaningful? What of it is actually making life better for them or others? Nearly nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not using discernment to say, okay, this is probably mostly my projection. Let's find the spark in here and let's just go deeper, right? Let's just go deeper. If you see a Buddha on the road, kill him, right? Mm-hmm. That Buddhist saying, you're meditating to find your own enlightened mind. So if Buddha Shakyamuni appears in front of you and does a happy dance, the message isn't get up and do a happy dance. The message is keep fucking meditating. And so this dial a deity thing, it just doesn't, it's not the point. The resonance and the spiritual authority that comes with it, which then allows you to operate on your agency and do a folk magic spell or any other spell or speak something into reality that comes to pass. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm interested in. And sure, it's as somebody who is prone to those phantasmagoric voyages, right? Like, it took me years to realize, like, yeah, okay, cool. I close my eyes and weird shit happens. Like, I could be in an open circle and somebody could utter, like, the most nonsense invocation of all time, and I'll probably get something.
Yeah.
But but that's not a bonus. That's a problem. Yeah. That's a disability that looks like an ability that I had to work to say, no, we got to get these spirits to shut up so we can hear the spirits that actually matter. And that's where the resonance comes in. And then when these folks who have difficult time seeing and hearing a spirit, when they finally do have a vision or something, they'll reach out and be like, "Oh my God, I've been practicing for months. The course could be over." And they're like, "But I keep practicing because life is getting better. But I finally had this crazy dream about Hekate." And then they start sharing something. And they're either like, and then what she told me about this person at work turned out to be true. And it was important that I find out about it. Or they'll say something, and then I saw this other spirit, and I'll be like, yeah, that's a spirit in Hekate 2, like the next level of the course. So, you just saw a spirit that I have also seen. And so here's some information about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of stuff we want.
Oh, I agree.
And that comes with resonance.
Yeah.
And
resonance is my jam.
Yeah.
I could not. It's the word I've been looking for. I think I've written in my own book about resonate and things like it, because I talk about the nature of hauntings, and right. how you would approach it magically. And like I talk about the kind of spirits you might encounter there having nothing to do with what your normal paranormal investigator might think. It has everything to do with the resonance, like the type of way that place has gotten.
Yep.
Anyway, talking about Hekate and resonance, here's something I often think about. So you should recognize this.
Oh, yeah.
You can see it, right? Made for the Sorcery of Hekate course. This is mine. Yeah. This is the key. I've done the procession of the key with. You know exactly what types of places it's been. Sorry, folks. You're going to have to join the course to find out more details about this mandala. But each one of these beads is a Io Heka Io Ho every day, 100 times. Every single day since I entered the course. Way back whenever that was, 3 years, 4 years ago, whatever it was. Every day, Io Heka Io Ho, 100 times on this thing. And I've done magical operations with this. It's gone with me to places. It's helped me with certain skills. I've used it in divination practices. I've done all sorts of things with this. This has become one of the most sacred of sacred things I've ever had in any of my practices.
Yep.
Someday I'm going to die. And somebody might find this. I don't know what's going to happen with all my shit or who will still be alive to deal with my shit. Right? So somebody's going to find this.
You got to make it.
Does someone pick this up? Let's take this scenario. Does someone pick this up when I'm dead and gone? In all the years of practice of daily in and out, Io Heka Io Ho, connecting with the mandala, doing magical work with this, everywhere this key has been. Does that resonance somehow break through to someone?
I think it can, yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot.
I think an ordinary person could pick that up and, get, even if they didn't know the name Hekate, or, they could utter a wish on that and start drawing upon the power that has become stored and resonant therein.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dark red and black. It looks spooky, so there's that.
Decide on the things that you want to be buried with. Decide on the things that you want to be destroyed upon your death.
Yeah.
Decide on the things that you want to leave to family and inheritance, and then decide on the things that you want to hide in strategic locations around the world with, geocache coordinates hidden in riddles to be figured out in future generations.
Yeah. It's the one thing in my collection that I think about, of all the things that I have, that I think about, I want to leave it in the world somewhere, because I think about like the Dalai Lamas, and how they're tested with objects. And I just wonder, if there's a part of my soul that reincarnates, and if I still resonate with something that I've had magical practice with, will I find it? And how would you know? But still, the thought of it, it's fun. I like to entertain those things. Yeah.
It is. It's a lot of fun.
Anyway, I think this is a good spot to end the regular portion of the show. We'll take the rest of the conversation over to Patreon, but before we do,
the VIP room.
That's right.
Champagne VIP.
Yeah, you know me. Now it costs about the same as your Starbucks coffee. Stop your bitching, people. No. So think of it as buying me a coffee. Before we go, is there anything that you wanted to get into? Anything you have coming up? I mean, courses coming up or anything?
If you don't have the book, buy the book. Consorting with Spirits. There's a bunch of stuff coming up. I'm always every few months, usually twice a year, but now I'm actually thinking about increasing it because people just want it more, and I can't. Like, I have to return money because they're like, even though I'm 4 months late, I'm trying to join and just sending you money in hopes that you'll let me in. And I'd be like, we're like, it's way too late. So, the Sorcery of Hekate, that's and the Black School of St. Cyprian, two very, very different courses. A new course called the Sorcery of Jupiter, or Jupiter, the Sorcery of Achievement. 3 very different approaches to magic. But they're all courses that have a Q&A, so a back and forth week to week between you and me and the other students. Other courses that you can just get at any time. They get delivered in emails. Level Up, Strategic Sorcery, any of the arcane audios that I have available on my website. So strategicsorcery.net. And then coming up, there should be some interesting things. There will be new editions, expanded editions of Protection Reversal Magick and the Sorcerer's Secret coming out soon. There may or may not be a Cyprianic grimoire popping out, in a year or two. So keep your eyes open. I'm almost 50 years old, but I am not short on ideas. I've still got more ideas than I have time to execute them. So.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I'm almost 45. I'll be 45 in May. And as the partner in my life likes to say, I always have too many projects.
Yep.
That's how I'm trying to fight off dementia, folks. That's the whole goal. I don't know about you, but that's what I'm thinking about. All right. Well, thank you again for being here. It was awesome to have this conversation about spirits.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, everybody, if you want to come join the rest of the conversation, again, it's going to happen over at Patreon. So you need to go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com, click join the membership. And like I said, for about the price of what you paid for at Starbucks today, gets you access to the entirety of the archives and this conversation and all upcoming goodies. Stay weird out there, my friends. And now it is bonus audio time. Jason Miller, welcome back to the Patreon edition, the VIP room, as it were.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the usual question, the one they hear in the promo at the end of the show, is always like, what famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? And we've done that. For you, I was thinking, what famous person's spirit have you interacted with successfully?
Ooh.
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions, magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.